Thank you very much. Record of the meeting. Do members agree to approve the record of the meeting of the committee held on the 4th of December 2024 and to also note on record of the meeting of the JCC committee held on the 4th of December 2024? Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. I have no urgent matters. So move on to item 4, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other significant interests. Councillor Hamilton.
Just to declare my trade union membership, NEU.
Councillor Field.
I am a member and a trade union representative for TSSA, and I'm also a member of Unison.
Councillor Cook.
I'm a member of the NAHT, and just for transparency, and it comes up later in the agenda, just to declare that I've got a membership in Medway Sport for swimming, just because it might come on the item, but I've had advice just to note that for the record. Thank you
very much. I'm also a member of the ASLEF Trade Union. Do we have any other interests? None? No, thank you. Move on to the first item of business, which is item 5, is the Senior Management Leadership Competency Framework. Nicola Smith to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report focuses on the introduction of a new Senior Management Leadership Competency Framework for service manager level and above. In terms of the background to this report, a cross-directorate strategic working group was established in January 2024, which was charged with establishing a framework focused on building leadership capabilities across the council. The group was chaired by the Director of Place and comprised service managers, although there was some strategic service manager engagement also. The strategic working group was supported by a HR working group chaired by myself, which mainly focused on researching best practice, predominantly in local government, evaluating that practice and reporting the research back to the group, whilst I was charged with the drafting of Medway's framework in the latter stages of the project. It was agreed by the strategic working group that the framework needed to align with our council values and behaviours, and the group felt that a national framework should be adopted or we should mirror other local authorities rather than reinvent the wheel. There was also considerable debate about where professional frameworks align, and there is the opportunity where these exist or are being developed for these to be considered alongside the generic management leadership framework. The main national management and leadership framework that is held in the highest regard is the Chartered Management Institute's framework, which is used across the private, public and voluntary sectors. This is also used as the basis for Level 7 leadership and management qualifications nationally, so it was agreed that we would mirror that framework where possible. The result is the draft framework at Appendix 1 of the report. While this framework may be used as a development tool for all our managers, what this framework does not do is address a key element of the MedPay review, which is to enable progression through the pay range based on performance and capability. A further piece of work is required to develop our existing performance appraisal and career conversation process so that it is specifically tailored to senior management roles, and an outline model of the factors would need to be taken into account at appraisals. And this is outlined at Appendix 2. What would also need to happen is to introduce spot points within the senior manager pay scale to facilitate progression through the pay range. This would be a matter for full council. Another key aspect of the MedPay review has been salary benchmarking for many roles where we are finding it difficult to attract and retain staff. In order to ensure we are attracting and retaining the best managers, benchmarking should also feature when looking at senior roles, and we have approached South East employers to assist with this as they are in the strongest position to provide accurate local government data. A small budget has been identified for this, subject to budget decisions at the council meeting in February. I welcome any questions and comments on this report.
Thank you, Nicola. Do we have any comment? Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nicola, for your report, and also thank you for your clarification, because when I read the report, I was thinking it was going to be similar to MedPay and progressing up the roles and so on and so forth. I would like to understand, but because leadership is quite different. I mean, there's lots of different leadership styles, and people adopt leadership styles, and how some of those styles would not be very high in the box, and others would be very high in the box because of the situation they're in. Also, sometimes, and I reference Shackleton, that probably one of the best leaders we've ever had in this country, that he dynamically changed his leadership styles depending on the task in hand that he had to do. So how are we gonna measure people doing that? Because depending on the task they've got to do, they should be adopting different leadership styles. You know, if it's an emergency to deal with a problem you might need a different style to an ongoing long-term project. So how are we going to use this to sort of balance those issues up? Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Would you like to come back on them points, please?
Lovely. Thank you very much. I recognise that leadership styles can be contingent on the circumstances, and I do believe there's enough flexibility within this model. There are 5 core areas and 19 specific areas within the model. It would be impossible to actually be focused on all of those areas, and there will be certain levels within that may not be achievable by the very nature of the job and the remit that it's in. So we do require some flexibility in using the model as a development tool, recognising that the contingency factors to leadership styles. It is seen very much as a conversation piece with the senior manager and their line manager in order to get the best out of the individual. It's been suggested by a strategic working group that we would probably focus on about 4 or 5 areas within the 19 specific areas in a given year in order to get a reasonable amount of challenge and stretch for an individual manager to develop. But this allows the flexibility for growth without being specific or tight on the actual details. It allows for a bit of flexibility around each individual role. What the Appendix 2 does is actually then identify how that might work in practice and putting this into place. And in using the performance appraisal process, you would be looking at things like the personal performance, the person's progress against their targets and objectives as well. You'd be looking at the service performance, such as the One Medway Council plan and how the service has actually performed against that. You'd be looking at individual service plans. You'd be looking at budget dynamics and whether people have come in on budget and what risk management has been put in place in order to be able to address the issues there. Some of that might actually be linked as well, risk management, about leadership styles. And you say in certain styles being used for certain reasons. So, for example, if there was a very urgent piece of work or an urgent project that needed to do, you may need a leadership style that is more autocratic. Yeah, exactly. And so you might need to adopt that. This tool allows you to adopt different styles in contingent on what result you want at the end of it, but you would have to build in risk management around that, and that would need to be monitored in the performance appraisal. We also need to look at in-year opportunities and threats, because things come up all the time, not just around the risk, but actually about those opportunities that might come up for a manager. That you might have one area where a funding stream comes out of the blue for whatever reason, and they grasp that, and you have to change your direction of travel as a manager. And that we need to adopt those sorts of flexibilities around it. There's also some areas, again, who are very wedded to their professional frameworks. So if you think about legal, for example, and if you think about roles in areas where there's quite tight controls, like audit, for example, there are professional frameworks in place, and alongside this, those sorts of professions are looking at how this will align to their professional frameworks also. So it's a complex mix of targets and objectives in order to achieve this, that allows the flexibility to adopt leadership styles as long as it's within our council values and behaviours, which set in some ways the tone of what our leadership styles are like for the organisation. Hopefully that's a full response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thank you. I really welcome this document. I think you've covered lots of that just then in your introduction, and in the answer there, the link with the Nolan principles as a kind of baseline. I thought, that exactly as you've just described, the behaviours, leadership behaviours, and then the adaptation for styles and for context. There were a couple of points just for the report itself, just for clarity. So I think 3.4, I was slightly concerned that the attendance at the strategic working group wasn't always high, and I wanted to reassurance that this was a widely adopted and worked on policy. I can see that it has gone to CMT, so I can see it's been, but thank you also for bringing it here. I wanted to check around 3.5. There was just little wording around where possible align with national management standards, and I just wondered what the caveat to that is, because I think if something's where possible, it almost gives us a get out rather than a aim for. And how do we ensure that that is there? Particularly then if we're holding this up as best practice. And then I was really curious around 7.1 and this external benchmarking money. And I wanted to sort of know how we would measure the impact of that investment. What work would we be doing for that? What's the hoped outcome of that benchmarking? Thank you.
Yes, please, Nicola.
Lovely, thank you. I might call in for the last bit on 7.1, the external benchmarking, because my line manager, Nicola, has been dealing directly with South Eastern employers, so it's a little bit more privy to the detail in that than I am. In terms of the commentary regarding 3.4, the attendance not being high, we got around that in a lot of ways by doing workshops, and although we might have had a small group of people, they were quite intense in terms of testing out the documentation and seeing what it was like, what it'd be like in practice for individuals. So there were 2 workshops, and each one had about 6 people on there. And so although we didn't have the 20-odd people that were part of the main group, it was high-quality discussions that went on there that were then fed back to the group remotely. And there was a Teams channel as well that people could impact, look at and contribute towards as well. So we didn't just engage through the meetings; we engaged through other methods as well. In terms of the comment on 3.5, where it says about where possible we will align with the national framework, it's because the national framework is huge. And when you can actually go into Chartered Management Institute website and you can do your own assessments of where you are on their framework. The language that's used is often very private sector led, and so I had to adapt that. And certainly there was nothing in there about the political dynamic, working in a political environment. So I had to write that section myself as well. So it wasn't possible to align with the national framework there. I needed to work out for myself what it would look like here. That particular one is quite a challenge to some of our senior managers, because some senior managers get a lot of exposure with councillors and others don't. So the very end one of that particular one is about, the strategic influence, but if they've not been given opportunity to have that, then they're never going to score a 4 on there. So it can't be seen as a linear process of scoring up to that level, but it does allow a dialogue for individuals to talk to their managers about how do I get that exposure. So there's some creativity around the development of the tool, but it's bedded in the solidness in the majority of them in the national framework to give it that substance and quality that we need to work for, with the benefit that individuals can then, if they decide that this is something they really want to throw themselves into in terms of their personal leadership development, can actually use that towards obtaining a level 7 qualification if they so wish. Thank you.
Did you want to answer 7.1, Nicola, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so at the start of the MedPay review project, we purchased Sendex salary benchmarking, and we had that in place for 2 years. And before we went ahead to renew, we went back out to look what was in the marketplace, because we were aware things were in the pipeline for some others, and new stuff's come about. And where we've landed on in terms of our research now, one of the reasons we stepped away from Sendex was it didn't sufficiently cover those real traditional local government roles for us adequately enough. And so our preferred option going forward would be to sign up to the South Eastern Employers membership, and that would give us access still to Sendex via them, but also access to the London and South East salary benchmarking scheme, which would give us real kind of comparators to us in other local authorities. And the added benefit of that is we have full membership to South Eastern Employers, which gives us lots of other resources, not least HR business partner working forums, wellbeing working forums, equality working forums. So really working with like-minded individuals around progressing those kinds of agendas too. So we really think the cost of it is significantly less than Sendex was, and we're getting all these added additional benefits on top of that.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Cook?
I mean, just to say thank you, because I think I read it as £15,000 just to benchmark the framework. So it's really helpful to see that for that money, you're getting a huge wealth of different benchmarking forums, and this would be part of those conversations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? No, okay. Hopefully our senior management come to a better end than Shackleton, but I move to the recommendations.
So the committee is asked to support the induction of the Senior Management Leadership Competency Framework to be rolled out on 1st of April 25. To note that further work will be undertaken to ensure the principles of performance, progression and pay are applied to senior management roles, including the principle of progression through the pay range. To note the review of senior manager roles should be undertaken, which would include salary benchmarking against other local authorities and particularly unitary authorities, and to recognise that salary scales for senior managers will require review in order to enable pay progression through the pay ranges, and any proposed changes will require full council decision, and this review should aim to be undertaken within 6 months. And then feedback from the prior JCC was that unions welcomed this framework, and they will welcome that any observed concerns that they'd seen in leadership was being fixed. Thank you.
Seconded.
Sorry. Item 6, gender pay gap. Nicola Traynor to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Equality Act 2010 requires all employers with more than 250 employees to report annually on their gender pay gap. A snapshot is taken on the 31st of March each year of 4 key metrics, as detailed in this report at 3.4.1. The Council has a specific duty, does not have a specific duty to publish data on its ethnicity or disability pay gaps, but this data is also provided in this report. The data includes all council employees who were employed on the 31st of March 2024. Apprentices, seasonal, temporary or casual employees are included if they fall within the reference period created by the snapshot date. The national average for the gender pay gap for the year 2023-24 was 13.1%. The council are reporting a gender pay gap of 5.96% for this 2025 reporting year, a further decline and the lowest since reporting begun. Our ethnicity pay gap data shows that on average, minority ethnic employees are paid at a higher hourly rate of pay in comparison to white ethnic employees, a pay gap of minus 5.16%. Our disability pay gap data shows that on average, employees with a disability are paid a lower hourly rate of pay in comparison to employees without a disability, a pay gap of 2.37%. It's important to note that current declaration rates for ethnicity are 93.2% and for disability 58.8%, so that the pay gap data is based not on our full complement of staff. It is an action within our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan to try to increase declaration rates. The committee is asked to note the contents of this report in relation to the gender pay gap as detailed in Appendix 1 and prior to external publication, and to also note that the ethnicity and disability pay gap results are set out in Appendices 3 and 4 to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Any member? Councillor Field, Councillor Hamilton, I've got you down as well.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this report. I just want to go through the table 4.9.1, which is the median and mean hourly rate gap. And you set out particularly in 4.10 and 4.11 why these trends are there. But just for a bit more clarification here, it's interesting that this is the first year that the mean hourly pay gap that appears to be smaller than the median hourly pay gap. So just for explanation of those that are slightly less statistical bent, is that, as you explained in 4.1, that seems to be around increased male hiring, is that at a higher, in the higher grades? And what would you expect this to be doing over the next year? Will there be a bit of shrinkage, particularly with the pay deal that's due to be implemented?
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the median, it looks an anomaly this year, I agree. It's literally an increase of 8 male employees has shifted the median point by a very small margin. And what we can see when we look at the quartile data is that there, as a percentage, more male roles tend to be in the higher quartiles, and so that has pushed the median up quite significantly, even though we're only talking about 8 additional males. Does that make sense?
Sure. So, were those eight roles particularly at a higher end of the areas? Is that why the only 8 roles skew, or is it just a real quirk?
I don't know exactly off the top of my head. Those 8 roles could have been throughout. I can go away and ask for some more detailed information in terms of that and come back to you. But it's just that where is the median point? It's shifted, and it could be that some are in the higher quartiles and some aren't. It's just moved that point.
Okay, you're happy with that response, Councillor Field? Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, I'm less happy with that response because actually it's flagging some underlying issues around recruitment to me. So if we go to 4.4, we've got our workforce gender profile is 74.6% female and 25.4% male. So if 8 appointments, all of whom are male, skews the median by that much, then I suspect there is an underlying issue. Also like to go, so 4.11 you've explained and Councillor Field has flagged up. Like to go to 4.14 as well. So the number of female employees in each of the quartiles is slightly above the workforce gender profile of 74.6%, except for the upper quartile. So we clearly have issues in terms of recruitment into the upper quartile and into higher management roles in terms of the male-female approach. So I'd like to know how we're going to tackle that, because that significantly concerns me.
Nicola, did you want to come back on them points, please?
Yes. So we haven't, at this moment in time, developed an action plan on the back of this report. So we're bringing the report first and then we'd publish the data and work on an action plan. Some of that will be linked with some of the work that we're doing around our EDI strategy, for example, an action plan as well. We've also got, we're in this kind of transitional period in terms of our pay scales, and it's my belief that where we're moving to the new MedPay PPP, where there are there's not an opportunity in the recruitment stage to negotiate salaries within the range like there used to be, because we've got 3 set points. It's much more transparent around what your competency should be for those 3 set points. Traditionally, men have been more, there's lots of research out there that says men are more likely to negotiate on pay. And I think where we're being much more transparent around what your performance needs to look like against the pay levels, I think more women will feel more able to say, oh yeah, that's me, I am at that level and that's what I should be asking for. So I think there's some real positives in terms of what we're doing around our pay scales and our career progression frameworks for that. Yes, I'm sure that we could drill down lots into all of this data significantly. I think we should. At this moment in time, I don't have the resource to do that. Personally, I am not qualified to do that, but absolutely we need to take that away and, as I say, look at building an action plan off the back of this report.
So just given what you said about significant improvements in transparency and the historic issues around who can negotiate better or who feels more confident about negotiating better, can we, for the next report, have the last 5 years, so we can track those quartiles, put in, so we can see if that shift is actually starting to happen. Because I'm particularly concerned about this upper quartile.
Nicola, did you want to come back on that
Yes, so-
5-year recommendation?
Absolutely, Chair. So we already have that information from the previous years that we've reported. So that's absolutely no issue in terms of presenting that collectively in one appendix, for example.
Thank you. Can you add that into the recommendations, please, Vice Chair? Councillor Hackwell?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, a couple of questions actually. Are we planning to balance the disproportion between men and women in the volume of people? Because we could measure it that way and say that we've got 75% women and only 25% men. Should we be looking to get it more naturally balanced with the population of the... I mean, you know, you can ask lots of questions about data, and that's one question you could ask. So what are we doing about balancing the employment out? And the only other question I really had was, why is the bonuses disproportionately higher for disability people and ethnic people? Because it's twice the amount that are getting bonuses percentage-wise than white people. What's the driver behind that?
Who would like to answer that one? Nicola?
I'll give it a stab, Chair. So should we be recruiting more men? Good question. I think in local authorities, we have many traditional female professions and roles. I think we have a suite of fantastic family-friendly policies that attract women to come and work here. So, yes, we could look at how we could recruit more men. I think we need to look at how we recruit more of everyone in some respect too. So I think there's some things societally, there's some things nationally that drive that. But yes, we could do that more locally too. So it's a good question. I don't have all the answers to that one. In terms of the disability bonus as well, I actually can't answer. Yeah, I can't answer that one directly. I don't
Sam, did you
believe.
want to come in and pick that one up?
Thank you, Chair. This isn't based on anything scientific. It's just an opinion that I have, which we can take away and look into. When we look at the split across the organisation, we know, for example, in the People Directorate, there's higher ethnicity than there is across the whole of the council. So, as an example, in the People Directorate, it's at 20% compared to place at 12%. We know that it's in the People Directorate, we've got the retention payments around the bonus in terms of that being counted as a bonus for the retention payment. So that might indicate why that is particularly high, but we'd need to cross-reference that data for my assumption to be tested. But that could be why that is showing particularly high. But we'll take that away and interrogate that a bit more. And the disability, yeah, similar figures, it's higher declaration rates within people than therefore there are in place. So that could be the imbalance. But let's cross-triangulate that data and test that assumption.
Yeah, just one from me on the disability was that there's a under recognition or people saying they're disabled, that data for them in the pay gap isn't maybe incorrect. Wouldn't that be the same for the bonus as well then? That it's just those who are declaring that they're disabled happen to be getting a bigger bonus. We don't know whether that, because there could be lots that aren't declaring that aren't getting the bigger bonus.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, I'm just looking under Appendix 4, the dataset D4, dataset D3. So mean bonus pay, we've got non-disabled at £2,541.88, disabled at £2,762.16. Why is there a 7.97% negative there? Could you expand, please?
My guess for this goes back to the £3,000 retention bonus that's paid to children's social care staff and our old MedPay 1A bonus that is still encapsulated within this data. So, and probably links to what Sam was just saying in terms of the numbers of declaration in the People Director are higher, so they're the ones getting the 3,000, whereas perhaps the others is the 1,000. I don't know that for definite without going to weigh, but that would be my hunch on that one.
For clarification, it's a lack of actual data. You don't have enough declarations.
For disability, it's just over the 50% mark.
Thank you. I know you said just on the declarations that you're working through the different forums to try and get that increase. When do you think that will start feeding through? Because we don't want to keep coming back year after year and saying there's low declarations by the disability community.
So we've relaunched our Equality Board, and that has got a new set of terms and reference. The members within the Equality Board are coming together in March to do a bit of a workshop activity for the day, which will be facilitated against all of the priorities that we've got to go through. That is the start to look at how we get the campaign moving forward around trust within the organisation. Now, we've done a snapshot survey across the organisation, and we've asked people why they won't make their declaration to us. We know that I don't know the figure off the top of my head tonight, but we know there's a small percentage who've absolutely said, doesn't matter what you do as a council, we don't wish to tell you. However, there is a large cohort that says, if you can tell us what you're going to do with the data, who will look at the data and the fact it can be trusted, they will declare knowing that there's going to be action taken. So we've got a lot of information back from the organisation as to now what we do to build that trust up. So that workshop in March is our kind of first planning around that campaign, and then there will be a declaration drive and much more conversation about it. So I guess perhaps in summer we could come back to share the plans with you around what we've done and what we further propose to do, and whether or not that's made an impact on those declaration rates.
Thank you very much. Is there any other member? No, I'll move to the Vice Chair then, please.
Thank you. So the committee is asked to note the contents of this report in relation to the gender pay gap as detailed in Appendix 1 to the report prior to external publication, and also to note the ethnicity and disability pay gap results as set out in Appendices 3 and 4 to the report. I've also added the recommendation to produce a 5-year table to track movement across the 4 quartiles in future reports, commencing with the 2026 report. And we've just had that conversation on sharing plans on the disability declaration in the summer. And then the feedback from JCC was that unions were delighted with the reduction in the gender pay gap, but were disappointed with the disability gap and recognise there's work to do to address this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Hamilton, thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Moving on to item 7, pay negotiations 2025 and 2026. Sam Beck-Farley to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just as a reminder, the Council came out of national agreement back in April 2013, and since then we've been in local agreement with trade union colleagues. Paragraph 6 of the report details the trade union pay claim for this year, which is from Unison, and that represents a return to NJC by the third year of administration, a 5% flat rate consolidated increase for all staff, as well as an uplift in CPIN payments of 5%. The Council's response to the pay claim is as follows. So at this time, we're not recommending a return to NJC. However, we are more than happy to keep negotiations open and keep a watching brief on the situation. There are a number of reasons for this. One is we are, as you know, within the med pay review, so we don't have a stable position across the organisation where everybody is on exactly the same terms and conditions, which enables people to be rewarded against their skills and experience that they bring to work, as well as the opportunity to progress through a career framework and gain progression. We need to make sure that that scheme is embedded and evaluated and creates stability for the whole organisation. We've been doing the review for the best part of 18 months and have all intention of having this completed within the first quarter of the new operational year, no later than May. Also, in terms of the NJC award for this year, we know that that's not been tabled at this time, and we know that that comes much later in the year. And we also know that based on the provision that was awarded last year, there is now no headroom in the bottom of the band. So for a national position, they will need to shift some of those pay points, and there would be no point in us manoeuvring our organisation or even doing any costing to what they've currently got, knowing that that will change. And for us, it's about creating stability. Once we know the national position, then we're absolutely open to having those conversations, and this has been discussed and agreed with trade union colleagues. In terms of the 5%, We, within our financial outlook in 25-26, estimated a 7.8 million pay allocation for staff, and that was to go towards the pay award and also the impact of the med pay review. When we discussed this assumption of a 5% uplift with trade union colleagues and the chief executive, we mutually agreed at that time that that was beneficial all round, hence the claim that's come in at 5%. Now, we are aware that this is higher than what some people might expect it to be given inflation. However, we are recommending this in light of our market position as an organisation. So whilst we are doing the med pay review, that does not mean everybody is getting an uplift. So we do need to ensure that our salaries remain competitive to the others that are around us. We've also listened to our exit surveys as to why people are leaving us. So therefore, reducing turnover is absolutely crucial for us. The main reason people are leaving is because of pay and career progression, and both our cost of living award and our med pay review seeks to address just that. We know that we've got high turnover across the organisation, which has reduced. So the turnover has reduced 6% from the previous year, where we introduced the 5% and started the med pay review. And so far this year, in terms of a rolling total, we know that it's gone down by a further 2%, bringing us much more in line with our ambition around 10%. So we are on the right track in terms of retaining colleagues here at Medway. Because we've had considerable low cost of living increases in the past, that has created a drift in the market and has meant that this pay review in particular has been quite challenging and has taken longer than we intended. 5% last year was noted as generous and it was well received, but it was necessary against the backdrop of the historical pay increases we hadn't had at the time. So we continue to remain competitive within the market. We continue want to reduce our turnover to ensure that our colleagues stay with us, and that's why we're recommending that 5% is just equally important this year, whilst I appreciate in the context of inflation that might look out of kilter. But there is a backdrop, and I'd urge you to consider thinking about the history of the 8 years that we've just had, as well as this particular point where we are trying to remain competitive and have an attraction into our organisation to become an employer of choice. Moving on to the sleep-in payments, we are not recommending that we increase sleep-in payments. So we done that last year, if you recall, and that was put forward as a recommendation. We are currently at a £47 sleep-in payment. The national position is 41.78, so we are considerably over the national position. In light of us considering a return back to national, it wouldn't seem sensible to continue to increase. However, what we did discuss with the trade unions and the chief executive was there are many allowances that we should be reviewing. So our sleep-in allowance actually remains in a very competitive and considerably good place, but there are other allowances we should consider. And what we've agreed to do is for the next round of pay review, which will be for next year, when we go into negotiations, at that point we would have run out a full review of all our allowances and made recommendations in this round next time as to whether other allowances need to be increased in light of what's around us and what we know at the time, and that being very much in line with NJC should there be a return that we need to make. In addition to the trade union pay claim, we are also recommending a number of other benefits. So one of those is an additional day off for wellbeing to be taken in or around the birthday of the individual. We've got considerably high sickness across the council. That has been high for a number of years. So just to give you some context to that, 22-23, we lost just over 18,000 days, 23-24, over 20,000 days. And already so far on the rolling year to date, January to December, we know that we're sitting still at 21,000 days. When we look at the staff survey, which was completed and you will recall was presented to this committee, one of the key areas that people wanted to see in terms of recognition was time off. So 64.8% of the respondents selected time off as an area that they'd like to see in terms of recognition. And, you know, just again from our Medway live events that we've done with staff, most definitely the element of having this additional time off came up and was shared. Aside from that, we would also like to introduce a leisure centre discount, and there is an amendment to the paper, if I may, for this particular recommendation. So within the paper, we've agreed, we would like to agree a 50% discount on a single Premier membership to our colleagues. However, what we'd like to further recommend and table for tonight's discussion is a further discount of 25% for joint or family membership, so that we're covering those who are currently members and those who might wish to become members, with no monthly charge going below the threshold of £20. In addition, we'd like to extend this offer to Medway Council councillors for consideration. The reason that the leisure centre discount is being tabled this evening is because, again, within our staff survey, this was one of the key areas that was constantly raised as people, in terms of people and what they'd like to see as a benefit that we don't currently have. We did have this before as Medway Council, but it was removed a while back, so that has never been reintroduced. And in light of wellbeing, the days off sick, the sense of giving people opportunity to participate within the leisure centre facilities, we would like this to be considered for our staff as well as their families, as well as Medway Council in councillors as well. And then finally, we would like to also introduce a salary sacrifice cycle to work scheme, as well as a shared cost additional voluntary contribution scheme. All details are contained within the annexes for the background of those. And then the last two are around pay. So this is alignment for social care and occupational therapists across adults and children's. Again, the background of this is within the paper, but as you heard from JCC, this has been an ongoing debate for a considerable period of time. I must stress that we're not bringing the social worker pay scales into the med pay review as such, because they've been on separate scales from what we had previously, and this would be a considerable amount of consultation work and contractual changes. So what we're doing is aligning those together in light of whether or not we return to NJC or not, or we bring them back into med pay. What we don't want to do to the organisation is put them through two massive pay reviews, and it's really important we stabilise the organisation and avoid any uncertainty. And then finally, it's a return for the youth service to the JNC, which was discussed and agreed at the EMC on the 4th of December. So hopefully that's articulated the play claim we're putting forward for recommendation this evening, and I'm happy to take questions, comments or concerns, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Do we have any questions or comments regarding the pay negotiation? Councillor Hatwell.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with some easier things, if I may. The push bike thing, I thought we already had a scheme for push bikes that we could salary sacrifice. I seem to remember it was in the past. I remember people are actually having salary sacrifice for push bikes. So was that withdrawn and now coming back, or could you explain that a little bit more? I'll cut to the chase. I don't think this council can afford this pay rise. Last night we was at audit committee and we've reviewed the first draft report from our external auditors, and their biggest issue was that as a council we are not financially sustainable in the future. And if you think about it, this year's pay rise, or last year's pay rise that is being paid this year, cost an extra £10 million. That isn't a capital cost, that's a revenue cost. So it will cost us another £10 million next year. We're now adding another £9.4 million to that. So over the last 2 years, we've nearly spent £29 million on pay rises. We're having to go to the government and asking them for a handout, effectively, of cash for 26 million. That 26 million is just funding the pay rises for the staff here in Medway. It's not helping us run the council. And if you think about all the poor taxpayers that pay their council tax, they're being asked to pay the 5% that or 4.99, so we don't go over the 5%, which raises roughly £10 million a year. That £10 million is being spent on paying staff in this council rather than improving services for the households. So I personally don't think we can afford this 5% as a council. It seems like we're just maxing out the credit cards just to pay the employees. I'm all for paying people what they're worth, but we can't afford it.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you want to answer the question on, and I think that's probably more of a budget question for Katie, on the rest on this cycle to work scheme?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hackwell. If we did have a salary sacrifice scheme, it's before my time for bicycles. What we have had is an interest-free loan for people to purchase bicycles, so slightly different, and what we're trying to do is enhance the benefits that we've got. Before I hand over to Katie to get the exact figures, I think there is just a misconception there around the 26 million being on pay increases. Some of this has been statutory, and we've had to do it. We can't forget that. You know, there has been a statutory increase in a number of things that we must do, so some of that will be aligned there. So Katie will be able to articulate a bit more around, for example, pension contributions, national insurance contributions, as well as minimum salaries that we must put in place. And then we can't forget some of the right sizing we've had to do in terms of growing the establishments. We've had to increase our base of staff. So that 26 million hasn't just been on increasing every council employee's salary. And I think we do need to be clear about the figure in which has been applied to pay increases versus how we've done the statutory staff, as well as increasing the establishment, because we've had to have more people come in because the demand is higher. So I just want to make that for record, please. And then, Katie, you'll have some figures, I'm sure. Thank you.
Katie, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. So forgive me, Councillor Hackwell, I don't mean to be inflammatory, but you've made loads of statements there, many of which I can't disagree with. And I think the only kind of fact in there that I think I probably disagree with is that 5% on the council tax raise is about 8 million, so it's just less than... and that the actual pay uplift element of what's being proposed tonight is about 5.8 million, that's the 5%. And I think this has been outlined since, so the MTFO set this back out in sort of August. I think we were talking about what was happening to the sort of national pay review bodies and how we hadn't kept pace, and that was causing issues around sort of recruitment and retention. But just so that I can make sure that I answer what you actually want to hear, can I just ask you to clarify the question you want me to answer? Because you've made lots of statements that I don't necessarily disagree with, but I don't want to just waffle on about the budget in an unhelpful way, yeah.
Can we afford this pay rise as a council? It's a simple question.
So I think the council's financial position is really clear, and we've been flagging that there is a projected budget gap since August. Well, actually, really, since the previous August, when we've been publishing medium-term financial projections that show budget gaps in future years for the entirety of my career in Medway Finance, and I don't think I can take responsibility for that. So I think budgets are about making a decision about what you want to deliver as an administration and what the council wants to vote through in terms of a budget. And that this council voted through a council plan that sets out a set of priorities and objectives that the council wants to deliver. And in order to deliver on all of that, we need to have a stable workforce that's engaged, motivated, compensated fairly for the work that it does. And I think the workforce that we've got in place and the growth that we've put in place over the last couple of years, so the last budget, you'll be fully aware, included some sort of right-sizing activity, right? Reflecting that some of our services are so lean that they can't actually deliver the level of service that this organisation wants to. And I think unless we invest in a secure, stable workforce who's motivated, we won't deliver any of that stuff in the council plan. And I think that's the kind of the risk that we're talking about here. I think we've also... if you've had a chance to have a look at the Cabinet agenda for January, we took a report forward about the financial settlement that the government have actually published. And that gave us sort of the biggest cash terms increase that we've had in the whole time I've been in finance. So the settlement reflects something like 11 million extra over what we'd expected at that point, and there's still to come funding for the national insurance contributions impact, so we haven't even got the full extent of that. And they've published a consultation paper about how they're going to reshape funding moving forward. And that all looks likely to direct more funding to organisations just like Medway, i.e. where we've got relatively low ability to raise tax compared to other areas, and relatively high deprivation according to the indices of multiple deprivation. And I think we're about to publish a report for Cabinet in February that will articulate the latest thinking on the budget proposals. And that includes some medium-term financial projections based on the latest data and our kind of reading of that. And I think there's a considerably reduced budget gap moving forward when you take into account everything that's happening in that world. I suppose my final point about affordability is it's a really difficult question to answer because we don't have, or we aren't projecting to have, without the support of government through the EFS scheme, enough income to fund all of the services that we want to deliver. I can't sit here and say, I can't point to pay being the problem because there are other pressures adult social care is a bigger number, for instance. Homelessness is actually a bigger number. And it's not for me as a officer to determine which element tips us over that line. I think that's a decision for the administration and ultimately for all 59 of you on the night of the 27th. Hopefully that's somewhat helpful. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Katie. Did you want to come back, Sam?
Yeah, if I may, I mean, in context, as I said, in terms of inflation, what we should be paying in our financial situation in isolation is this. Just, you know, you're right to challenge it, absolutely, and I can't disagree with that. But I think in my opening comments, I mentioned about turnover, for example. So recruitment and having gaps in our vacancies against our service delivery is hidden costs that we don't necessarily measure, but that we know they're hidden costs. When we're bringing somebody back into the organisation, having to train them again into the skills level that we've lost, that is a hidden cost to us. It's time taken out of our everyday activity. And we've got high ambition within our priorities in our council plan. We've got a fit plan whereby we are driving down the efficiencies, and we've got to have a stable workforce to do that. We can't afford to keep going out to market, bringing people in and starting again almost in that way. So just to give you some figures, I gave you some percentage decreases, but in 22-23 we had a 20% turnover. 23-24 it went down to 13.3%, so that was after the 5% went in and after we started the med pay review. Rolling year to date, we know we're at 11.6% with an ambition of being at 10%. That is a considerable reduction in the turnover of our workforce, and because of the exit surveys, we do know that pay and career progression has been a major factor for people to leave Medway. It's not because they don't like being here, it's not because they don't want a future with us, because ultimately, even though people are leaving because of their own situation around progression and pay, they are saying they would recommend Medway Council as a place to work. So it's not about what's going on in the round. If you take a snapshot over our last 8 years, in terms of inflation, we've been below inflation in terms of our pay increase that we've offered as an organisation. And because of the limitations in the pay system that was there, that meant people generally couldn't progress. So people would only progress based on that annual decision of a 1 or 2%. There was no other progression in terms of that salary increase. Didn't matter how great they got with their skills or how much they developed themselves or how experienced they became. Their salary only went up by that percentage increase unless it was promotion. So in a way, we have kind of held back a number of people over the course of 8 years. And the point of the med pay review coming in is to allow the progression within the band so that people can be rewarded for their skills and we can retain them without them leaving to get salary higher elsewhere. And the 5%, whilst it doesn't make up for sort of like the 8-9% that we didn't match in terms of inflation, we do have some market catch-up to do compared to our competitors around us. So whilst in the context of just this year, it looks kind of out of kilter, we've got to take into account the position of the organisation, the turnover, and what we're trying to do to stabilise the workforce. And I think that the few figures I've shown tonight does demonstrate that the turnover is reducing, we are doing something right, and based on the feedback from the exit surveys, that has most definitely been angled towards pay and progression, which are the two things we've been desperate to fix over the last 18 months and continue to do so. Now, we're not sitting here saying next year there'll be 5%, absolutely not. But in the context of where we sit today against our market competition and our turnover, for us as officers, we are recommending the 5% to make sure that we're on that even playing field in terms of retaining our staff, but being competitive within the market as well against colleagues around us.
Thank you. For me, more of a comment, but there is a question in there actually. If we keep losing staff, we can't provide them services. And retraining people does cost money every time with such a high turnover. That has a cost on the council as well, I'm assuming, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have a provision where we can bring people in 3 months before somebody leaves and do a handover. We have an establishment cost, and that's our salary budget. So when people are leaving, we're looking at handing out that kind of workforce element of it until we're recruiting to backfill. So there's always a lag in the system, if you like, against what our baseline salary position is anyway. And if we go to market, which has been the case quite a few times, if I take HR as an example, and have failed campaigns, we're sitting with vacancies in terms of then the service delivery being affected. So even within my own consultancy team, we're not on MedPay yet. We nearly are there. But I had 5 failed campaigns with with what I was going to market with. So my roles had to be benchmarked and had to be looked at. And that's been the same as many pockets across the organisation. But I do want to stress that the MedPay review hasn't increased everybody's salary. So it's not in every part of MedPay that we've had failed campaigns or people leaving. And if we look at the first tranche of the pilot around MedPay, we know that 64% did benefit from a pay increase. But that was not necessarily just because we went to market and they needed a skill shortage payment. It was because a lot of people were sitting bottom of the band and needed to be accelerated through that band against their skills. And it was because we re-evaluated a number of jobs where the jobs have changed over the considerable years. Now, we know from phase 2 that has came down slightly. It's at 34%, but we haven't completed phase 2. But what that does indicate is that not everybody in the med pay review is getting a pay increase. And that's why the cost of living increase is so important to many. So a long answer there, Councillor Prentice, but absolutely, I think, yes, the cost of hiring is a hidden cost to us and can be really limiting to our services, particularly with failed campaigns. And that's why the two go hand in hand to give us the best competition that we need within the market.
No, thank you for that. Let's not forget RPI was 13.8% in February 2020, and the employees that got nothing like that. Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, so I really welcome the negotiations and how constructive they've been. Would like to make a point. Our focus needs to be on stabilising our organisation. It also needs to be drawing a line and starting to become an employer of choice here in Medway for the people of Medway. So most of the people who work for us are also paying their council tax and they are contributing to the local economy. Just want to go back to the point that Sam has made. So it's not just about recruitment costs. It's about onboarding. It's about getting the quality of service stabilised. It's about teams in transition and the impact that that constant high turnover has on team performance. It's also about lengthy, ongoing, never-ending onboarding. All of those have hidden costs that are not reflected in a very transparent way. So I really, really welcome this. I hope that we will continue to make headway in reducing our turnover and that people, as they exit, will be exiting not because of pay and poor pay over the last 10 years, but because they have opportunities elsewhere that they want to explore. Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other member? Councillor Fern?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam. Some really good points that you've made, and you know I've been on this committee with you for a long time now, and it's really good to hear that the staff retention numbers have gone down, and you know I sort of understand that part of that is from the increase in the pay increase last time, which is fine, but. And again, you know, like Councillor Hackworth said, you know, some really good additional benefits, the Cycle to Work scheme, the Wellbeing Day and the sports provision. So I think that, you know, we've been trying to deliver for some time now, so I'm really pleased that they're in there. But like Councillor Hackworth, and sort of hearing the reassurance from Katie and yourself, you know, I still have some major concerns that this is not affordable to us. You know, we read in the local media that we're at risk of bankruptcy. We come back to the budget last year and we're raiding reserves and we're going for additional borrowing. So again, like Councillor Hackworth, some major concerns in terms of affordability. You know, I'm not expecting you to answer this, but you know that's my concern. I'm very pleased to see the other points, but I can't see that we can afford this.
Did you want to come back, Katie?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to add much really, but I feel like I want people to understand that we hear that and we feel that too. And right, part of my job, or a big part of my job, is to help this organisation to reach a balanced budget, right? And I'm acutely aware that there are lots of costs that are in our budget that are effectively beyond our control, right? So we've got demands on statutory services, and you all represent loads of people that we really desperately need to support, but we haven't had enough funding to do that. And I think the thing that I kind of want to hammer home, I suppose, and I'm also acutely aware that it's very difficult as officers to be talking about this, because we are also officers, and that doesn't just mean that this is about our pay, but this is also about all of our colleagues, right? And there are 3,000 odd people that work for Medway who are delivering face-to-face services for our residents, right? And when you talk about you want people to have good quality social care or to be supported into permanent and temporary accommodation, or you want people to, you know, have all of the services that we all celebrate, they're all delivered by individuals, and those individuals, they're the backbone of this place. And that I think that it's a really delicate balance, isn't it? Because those costs are in those pressures, right, of all of our services. We've got a workforce that we need to recruit, retain, and I think Sam sort of demonstrated a bit of a business case there about our actual staffing costs could probably be higher if we weren't recruiting permanent staff and keeping them. So I suppose I'm just sort of echoing your concerns, but also I'd just take us back to the fact that the government has recognised effectively that we are, in a large extent, underfunded to deliver a lot of those services, and I think that over the next 3 years they are setting out a path back to providing much more funding directed to organisations like us who need to deliver those services, and I hope that will mean that our budget gaps will get smaller over the next couple of years, and I think that we're on a path back to financial sustainability with a bit of luck.
Thank you. Sam, did you indicate you want to come in on that as well?
Yes, please, thank you. And, you know, like Katie, we absolutely realise it is a delicate balance. And there's been lots of discussion about this across senior leaders and the risk that's involved in this and what we need to do. And we've looked at various bits of data and understanding. And I think, you know, we've got a really ambitious financial transformation plan that looks at the efficiencies and savings that we've got to make to ensure that we are financially stable as an organisation. If we've got a constant churn of staff and we're losing those skills and experiences, we're not getting out of the starting blocks on some of those initiatives. So it's really important we retain the workforce to impact the stuff that we need to do that's going to make the greater savings than what we're putting on pay. So it is a risk, it is unknown. You know, it's ambitious what we've got. We're just reviewing the FIT plan at the moment. But in there is a lot of stuff we're asking this organisation to deliver against to enhance our financial stability as an organisation. Constant churn of people and losing knowledge and skills out of the door and bringing people in is only going to slow that transformation down. So it's really important to us that this is a committed and stable workforce. And as Katie says, these are individuals who are all committed to do this. If we look at our staff survey and the high numbers that were coming through in terms of people caring about this place, wanting to tell other people about what we're doing, wanting to understand what the council are doing, we do have a really committed workforce, but we can't just expect that commitment to be there without reward and recognition. And this is a way of rewarding, recognising, but also attracting people to come and work here in Medway so that we're not relying on high-cost locums when we don't have to. So, you know, we have debated every angle on this, recognising the pressure. So, yeah, absolutely right. Challenge, as I said with Councillor Hackwell's question, I would expect it. But, you know, we haven't just gone, oh, this is a nice thing to do. We've generally looked at what we need to do as an organisation in light of stabilising our workforce to achieve the greater things that we need to do.
Thank you. Is there any other member on the pay negotiation item? Okay, I'm going to ask some questions about pensions, bring you all back down to earth. Jodie, you're here, I think, about AVCs.
Jodie's also partially deaf at the moment.
Right.
You can speak very loudly. I will do my best.
Okay. What is the difference between, it says in the report, a few employees pay AVCs with the main scheme? Why is there only a few? Is the scheme now closed to people doing AVCs to the main scheme? And what is the difference between those paying AVCs with the main scheme in benefit-wise to this shared cost arrangement? And what happens after the 3 years? I'm assuming they're both DC schemes. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so we only have a few people paying AVCs at the moment because the schemes haven't been promoted. AVCs, additional voluntary contributions, can be paid by any member of the LGPS, okay? The shared cost AVC, so we have to enter into an arrangement. So My Money Matters are the provider for that. So it is a contract to provide a service and a platform. The shared cost AVCs, and shared cost is another word for salary sacrifice. So there are savings for the employee, for tax and national insurance, and there are savings for the employer as well. In the current AVC arrangement, it's taken from net pay. So there are no savings. So there's not an incentive for an employee to really pay extra into those schemes. So they're part of the LGPS offering, but they're not held within the main LGPS scheme. So there's a separate pension provider that funds those bits. So our vision, we do believe that those who are currently paying AVCs will move over to a shared cost arrangement, but that will be completely their decision.
Okay, thank you. That clears it up because I couldn't understand why you'd have the two, but with the national insurance saving, because it's now salary sacrifice, that makes more sense. So
Yes. Yep.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more comment on the pay negotiation? Before I move to Vice Chair, I will say that thank you very much for all comments on that. The whole point of this committee is that we do have that robust conversation that then goes through the process of full council. that we don't have the days where we used to talk in this committee before and a certain leader of the council then used to pull a 1% out that wasn't put at this council. So I'm glad that all elements are on this and that there won't be any surprises or magic tricks on the night. So I'll move to the Vice Chair, please.
Thank you. I'm going to read out the recommendations in full because I know there's been a few additions. So just please can officers just correct me if I've kind of missed or got anything wrong. So the committee's asked to recommend to full council a 5% increase for all staff on MedPay terms and conditions, which includes those on MedPay performance, progression pay scheme, as well as those who are on the legacy scheme. Not to increase sleep-in payments, not to return to national joint council pay scales currently, but keep negotiations open on this matter. An additional wellbeing day to be awarded on a colleague's birthday to be taken on the day or close to the birthday as agreed with line management. To offer a salary sacrifice cycle to work scheme with a scheme partner for an initial term of 2 years. To implement a shared cost additional voluntary contribution scheme with My Money Matters, formerly AVC, WISE, for an initial term of 3 years. To offer a 50% discount on annual single Premier membership to our leisure centres, an annual membership for the 25% family and joint with no monthly membership falling below £20 per month pass for Medway Council employees and Medway Council councillors to Medway leisure centres. Yep. To align the children and adult social care pay scales for the reasons set out in Appendix 4 to the report. To align the Joint National Committee Youth and Committee Workers Terms and Conditions except for automatic increments as agreed at this committee on 4th of December 2025. So just to check I've got the amendments correct there. Yeah. Just for 4th of December 24. Yeah. Okay, yes. That's just there. That's just a typo. Fine, thank you. And then, yep. And then the union feedback from the previous JCC was that they were delighted with the recommendation overall. The 5% is consistent with the public sector and starts to bring the needed adjustments. That they were pleased with the staff survey responses in the offer, that responses that had come as a result of the staff survey, and with the alignment of children and adult social care pay scales. And they requested the discussion really return to NJC to begin in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's quite a lot, but thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 8, pay policy statement. Sam Beck-Farley, please to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a regular report to this committee. So under the Localism Act 2011, we are required to provide a pay policy statement for each financial year. So within Appendix 1, you will find the pay policy statement. We have tracked the changes for ease. It's quite a large document, but that sets out our pay policy statement for the financial year coming. The main changes to note are those around the changes with the way in which we're doing our pay now. So the med pay provision, now known as performance, progression and pay, and then also any statutory increases that might have occurred also. And committee are asked to make full recommendations to full council if in agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? No, I move to the Vice Chair then, please. Sorry, no. Vice Chair.
The committee is asked to note the pay policy statement 25/2026 is set out in Appendix 1 to the report and refers it to full council for agreement. There was no specific comments from JCC.
Is that seconded? Councillor Field, thank you. They're racing each other now. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Yeah. Item 9, Organisational Change. Nicola Traynor to report. To introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a regular update provided to this committee that provides information on the organisational change activity in the council. This report covers the period 1st of April 2024 to the 30th of September 2024. In section 4 of the report, members will see the updates of the previously reported organisational change activity, and in section 5, a summary of the new organisational change activity. Consultation is carried out with staff and trade unions, and every effort is made to prevent any redundancies. Where staff are at risk of redundancy, they are supported to find suitable alternative work through the redeployment process. A summary of the activity can be found at Appendix A. 105 employees were consulted with during this period, primarily in maintained schools. There were a total of 12 redundancies, 10 of which were in schools. The Employment Matters Committee is asked to note the present position and support the arrangements for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? No. I'll move to the Vice Chair, please.
Thank you. Committee's asked to note the present position and the support arrangements for staff, and there were no specific comments from JCC.
Is that seconded? Councillor Field, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move on to item 10, early retirement redundancy payments. We do have blue papers for this. If anyone wishes to speak on them, can you please indicate that it's about blue papers, because then we have to exclude the press. Do we have anyone on? Yeah. And the public who are watching online, Gary, yeah. Do any member on item 10, early retirement and redundancy payments? No, I'll move to the Vice Chair then, please.
Thank you. The committee's asked to note the report and also feedback from the JCC that the unions requested transparency in reporting the flexible retirement data. Thank you.
Thank you. That's seconded.
Seconded.
Councillor Field, thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, everyone. Meeting closed.
Chair, we need to...
Item 11, revised managing sickness and absence policy, has been removed from the agenda tonight following comments at the JCC due to the item not being consulted. So we've removed that from the agenda. As such, meeting closed.